Hey everybody, welcome to one more round with Josh Norris. Today is going to be a special episode. This will be my last episode for some time. We're going to end the year right in 2023. Some of you that may know me know that it's been an interesting year, to say the least. Had some major health problems kind of creep up on me middle of the year, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that today and really share the deeper story of it all, because I've had probably 1,000 questions, hundreds of people through this process reach out to me. People pray for me literally around the globe. I mean, it's so humbling actually how many people cared for me during this time, that helped, financially helped, bringing food, watching our kids. It really, not that I didn't have a great belief in humanity before, but it definitely made me step back and realize that there are some amazing people out there. And I'm very grateful to have the sphere of influence that I've surrounded myself with through the years. And man, it just was humbling to have so many people reach out. So, with that, I wanted to share the full story, and hopefully this is something that, you can take something from, things I learned or through the experience, and use in your own life. But, I have to start out that in 2022, so a year ago, in April, I had heart failure. And that was something that crept up on me all of a sudden. At that point, I think I had worked out a little over 1,200 days in a row, which nobody should ever do, by the way, but it was something that I did every single day religiously. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe very well for a couple of weeks. Things that I was doing very easily before, like brushing my teeth or going to the gym and getting a workout, were just absolutely exhausting. And I finally came to the decision I had to go to the hospital. So went to the hospital. They diagnosed me with heart failure. Through several months, after I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks during 2 different stints, and they had finally gotten me on some medication that helped a little bit, but it took about really 3 months. It wasn't until June of that year that I started getting better, and I was on a medication called Entresto. And through that process, I started to get back to my old self. I was able to do all the things that I could do before, even at a higher level, in the gym. So I felt like I was getting back to normal. One thing I didn't know about heart failure, and they don't really tell you, is that it doesn't really go away. It's something that will continue on with you, and your heart can continue to quit on you, basically, is kind of how I put it. So I had started to wean off some of I was only on 2 medications in January of 2023, so this year. And it was because, I felt fantastic. I had gained the muscle back that I had before. I had the stamina I had before. I had the juice, my business that I was a part of at the time. The new agency, was going well. So I didn't feel like I wanted to be on medication the rest of my life. So I started weaning off, and there was no issue with it. I had started weaning off in December. By January, I was not on that medication anymore. And then, I was fine. So fast forward to July of this year, and I started feeling a little funny again. So there's a couple things about heart failure that I didn't know about until I had it. Number one, because you can't breathe very well, and basically your blood isn't pumping the way it's supposed to, you can start to retain water, which will push on your lungs, which causes this cough that just doesn't go away. And it's not a wet cough, it's a dry cough. It's annoying as all get out to people around you as well as yourself, and it just continues on and on and on. So when this started to creep up again in July, I started to get a little bit worried that might be happening again. And I was up in Flagstaff with family, having fun for the 4th of July. Then I went on my annual golf championship that we did in Sedona this year. Shout out to Dom Torres and the golf crew, and it was a lot of fun. But my energy level wasn't quite where I thought it would be, and I was thinking maybe it was the elevation, so when I got back down to the valley, I'd be fine. So we came back down to the valley. This is now kind of mid-July, and I still wasn't quite right, but I was doing all the normal business functions, all the meetings, all the things that I normally had on my calendar, and this continued to regress as far as my health. And I knew something was wrong when all of my meetings at this point in time, nobody knew this. I literally was laying on my bed, had my phone on speakerphone, and I would be just kind of doing everything I could to make sure that people didn't know I wasn't feeling well. Because I was like, I'll rebound. I rebounded again. Started taking the same medication, Entresto. And it just didn't get better. So now fast forward to August 14th. So this is about a month from that time. I had just been grinning and bearing it, not feeling well. My wife, Jessica, she had been at a point where she had said, hey, I don't think, you're going to get better. We should look at maybe going to the hospital again a couple times. And I was on board with this if we waited a couple days. So she had mentioned in a call with some of our friends at Arate, she was on a woman's call with Karen, and that I wasn't feeling well. And Karen's husband, John, who's a good friend of mine, he runs the Toyota dealership. He had a heart surgery the year before, so and I had heart problems the year before, so we had kind of a bond over that. He calls me. He's like, hey, Karen told me that you weren't feeling very well, and you were starting to have heart issues again. Are you going to the hospital? And I said, well, I'm not feeling good, and I was honest with him. And I said, I'm going to wait till Wednesday, and if by Wednesday, I don't feel better, and this is a Monday, by the way, if I don't feel better, I'm going to go back to the hospital or go to the hospital. And just to kind of give you a glimpse back, my hospital experience was terrible the first time. I had not been in the hospital my entire life until 2022, really. And being in there for 2 weeks through 2 different stints was just not something I ever wanted to repeat if I didn't have to. I didn't feel like the care was what I really needed, and I'm just being honest at that point in time. And I was like, yeah, if I can avoid that, I'm going to. So I told him, I said, hey, I don't want to do it. And he said, well, where did you go before? And I said, well, I went to this particular hospital, which I'll remain nameless. He says, well, that's your problem. You need to go to Mercy Gilbert. That's where I went. It's where I had all my stuff done prior to my heart procedure and all that. So, okay. And I said, well, I'm gonna wait till Wednesday. And he said, listen, you might not have another Wednesday. You need to get your ass in the hospital. And I was very surprised. I'm like, wow, okay. Maybe this is the message that I needed. So I listened to him, and I ended up telling my wife. She was upstairs at the time, and I said, hey, I think it's time. So we went to the hospital, went to Mercy Gilbert, checked in, and went through the normal protocols of, getting your blood pressure, EKG, which is they hook you up to all these different wires, and it shows basically the electrical pulses. Eventually, they did a echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound for your heart, and they found out that I was in heart failure again. And both my wife and I, we kind of knew this was coming, but we were thinking it'll just be like last time, to where I'll rebound, they'll put me on some medications, and we'll be good to go. Well, over the next week, that's exactly what the doctors tried to do. They tried to put me on every medication known to man to help with heart failure, and I felt lousy. I mean, I didn't feel any better whatsoever. They didn't know why I wasn't, rebounding the way that they thought I would on the medications, and, I was in severe heart failure. So there's a stat, or I should say a measurement called ejection fraction. This actually measures how your heart pumps. So your average human being should be around 60 to 65, right? That's where normal, you probably listen to this, that's where you're at. I was at a 12. And a 12, basically, typically you're dead. That's where most people, if they're not my age, not in my shape at this point in time, they don't make it. So when they found that out, it was very critical. And they, again, tried to increase medications, get me to a point where I was going to be okay. And it just didn't get any better. So now the doctors there at Mercy Gilbert didn't know what to do. So it was, who can we send him to? Now, during this time, this has already been a week, and I knew I wasn't getting out anytime soon. Through some situations there, I wasn't able to be paid going forward with my, current company that I, was with. And, that was a little bit kind of alarming, but I'm like, okay, I'll be out in a couple weeks. So I'll get things back to normal. So they ended up referring me over and sending me over to Chandler Regional. So Chandler Regional is hospital number 2 now. I had really not had any answers at this point. Didn't know when I was going to get out, what was going on. And I was told about this advanced heart failure team at St. Joe's. But I had to be met by a doctor at Chandler Regional first, or I should say physician's assistant, and he had to evaluate me. Because there were some things on my chart that they didn't like. And to be honest with you, one of those things was, I would have drinks on every night I'd have a couple drinks, right? Nothing crazy excessive or anything like that. They didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that I stopped taking medication, not under doctor's orders. Well, I didn't want to be on medication for the rest of my life. I didn't even know that was a thing that you should be. So it wasn't something I blatantly didn't do. I weaned myself off in my mind the right way, but they saw that as something that I didn't listen to medical direction. I didn't know that these things were on my chart. I didn't know that these were the things holding back. But as I met this gentleman who eventually would get me into the advanced heart failure team over at St. Joe's, he shared this with me, and I was like, okay, well, let me tell you the true story about me. I'm a family man. I try to do everything I can right. And okay, yeah, I do have drinks, so whatever. If I got to cut that out for the rest of my life, I'm good with that. As far as not taking medical direction or just shutting off medications, and being, an idiot, I'm not that at all. I did it, and I, weaned off. I thought the right way. I felt fantastic. So anyway, I tell my story, and he's like, you know what? I believe he didn't do anything, negligent on purpose whatsoever. And he ended up putting in a word with Dr. Brady, who was the head of the advanced heart failure team over at St. Joe's. And they agreed to accept me into their program. Now, there's really only 2 big advanced heart failure teams, period, in Arizona. And one was at St. Joe's. So as I got to know and I read up on Dr. Brady and his team, and I got to meet his team, it was pretty fascinating that this is really all they focused on. So I then was sent over to St. Joe's. And by the way, this was the second time that I actually had been outside now in 3.5 weeks. And both times were literally to be put in an ambulance to be shipped to another hospital. So now I'm at hospital number 3, St. Joe's. And at this point, I'm just hoping that somebody can tell me what my options are, because what I had been told is that my next option, since medication was not working for me, was a device called an LVAD, so a left ventricle assistant device. And this LVAD is something that basically goes surgically onto your heart and pumps your heart for you. And it's hooked to a battery pack, and basically you wear a vest that has all the tools necessary for this to work, and you wear it all the time. You can't submerge yourself in water. You can't jump up and down. You really can't do a lot of things you could do before. But the device itself is supposed to be sustainable for, an average of 6 years. So it'll sustain your heart until you can eventually get a heart transplant. So that's what this device is for. Because I was told this time, and really going forward, I was not going to be a candidate for heart transplant. So being told all that, going through this, emotionally, this was a very difficult time. I am a very positive person. If you've met me, you know that, probably to a fault sometimes. But when you're at a hospital, you can't sleep. You've been there for 3.5 weeks. Now you're at the 3rd hospital. You literally watch the clock sometimes from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m., not getting more than 30 minutes of sleep. And this goes on and on and on. And thank God my wife was there with me for as much as she could be, because that definitely helped. But your mind starts to play tricks on you. I'm a Christian. I have a strong faith. I believe in Jesus. I believe in that God has a plan for everybody, that he loves everybody. And I know that about myself. But even that's when, these thoughts started to creep in, like, am I going to make it? Did I do something wrong? All of these dark thoughts that, hopefully you've never dealt with, and certainly have never been in the hospital this long. But, when this kind of starts to go through your head, you start to really, evaluate what you've done in your life, what you want to do in your life. And I'll get to that, in a little bit. So now I'm at the third hospital. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, just somebody tell me what needs to happen. Put this device in my heart if that needs to happen, or whatever. But now I'm at St. Joe's. I'm with the advanced heart team, failure team, and they look at everything. They look at my charts. They look at everything that's been done to me, and they say, hey, we think we can get you okay on medications and get you back home. So for the next week, I basically was put on everything that they thought would work. And it was all under, very smart medical decision making. So I didn't doubt what they were doing. And they were trying to get me to a point where I could leave home based on medications and then, basically just take those medications as I'm home. And that week went by, and Dr. Brady I'd met once at about halfway through that point of the first week. So now I'm at about 4 weeks in, and great guy, by the way. Someone that he did all of the heart surgeries over at St. Joe's. He started the advanced heart failure team. I mean, he's got a pedigree like nobody's business in that world. And I would say we started to develop a bond, as we started to get to know each other. And he told me the second time, that he had come in and we had a long talk. He said, listen, if we can't start getting you better in a day, I'm going to tell my team to stop. He said, they really believe the medications are going to help, but he said, based on what I'm seeing, I can only give it a couple more days. And he oversees everything. So that couple days goes by. Sure enough, he says, we're pulling the plug on just the medications. And then I have a couple of his doctors come in, and they share some news with me. They basically share the decisions that I have to make. So my Jess is there with me, and we're sitting, I'm laying down, she's sitting down, and they talk to me about my 3 different options coming up. And they tell me again that a heart transplant is not in my cards. I'm not going to get listed for that anytime soon. So here are my options. Number 1, I can go home and we can manage with just the medications and manage symptoms, is what they say. Life expectancy, about 90 days. All right, get on to number 2. That was my thought. Number 2, they can send me home with what's called an inotrope drip, right? So I was on a medication that basically is like an adrenaline drip. And this helps the heart pump, but it has to be basically going through my system all the time. And I can send you home with that and medications, and your life expectancy could be 6 to 9 months. Okay, and when that goes through your ears, you're like, it's got to be a third option. And they said, and the third option is you can get a LVAD. So we can put that in your heart surgically, and that will help you your heart pump. Get your ejection fraction where it needs to be, and then eventually you can get listed. It could be, they said it'll be at least a year till you get listed. And then when you're on an LVAD, there's different criteria of when you're listed as a heart transplant patient of how critical you are. So it's a 1 through 7, scale basically. And you're way further down on the list when you have that LVAD because you can live, you can, be sustainable for 6 years. So I said it's going to be at least a year until you get listed, and then it could be a couple years after that until you can get a heart transplant. So that's option 3. Well, all I heard was live. I've got a wife, I've got 3 kids, just like any family person, man, woman, anybody who has kids, you want to see them grow up. You want to be in their lives. You want to, instill your principles. You want to see what they do with their lives. And, you want all of that. So I'm like, cool. If I got to be on this stupid machine, not stupid machine, but that's, what I was thinking. If I got to be on this machine for a while, so be it. I can, go to my kids' football games. I can watch them live their lives. I can, help them, with their studies, just all the little things that you don't think about until you're in a position where you can't do them, right? So I said, okay, well, option 3, that's obvious. And so now in my mind, cool, I'm going to get an LVAD. And they had scheduled this for me on the next Wednesday. I believe this was a Monday, so 2 weeks. So this was a Monday, and it was 2 weeks from that, so it was 16 days away. And now I'm getting prepped for this, and I was in a position where they were monitoring everything that was going on in my heart, and they found out that not just the left side of my heart that pumps, but the right side of my heart was a little weak. And they wanted to put a device in called the Impella. Now, the Impella is very similar to the LVAD in what it does as far as pumping the heart. However, it's a temporary device, not something that lasts forever. So they said, the LVAD we're going to put in your heart. It's going to show us if the right side really, does what it needs to do. And then, we can put in the LVAD. And I said, oh, okay. That sounds good. Now, this was not as major of a surgery, but still a surgery. In fact, if you were watching right now, I'll show you. So right here, see that scar? So that is where they insert the LVAD, which goes into your heart. And then there's another scar over here of, another basically tube that goes in. And this pumps your heart. It's this little machine that sits next to you and does amazing work. So I'm now on the Impella, and it does a really, really good job. I start feeling better because my blood is pumping the way it's supposed to through my body. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. And they still realize, though, that the right side of my heart isn't doing exactly what it needs to do, but the LVAD was still the plan. This upcoming Wednesday. So what has to happen for you to get an LVAD, which is a medical device that is not considered temporary, is you have to be presented to a board, and that board, you basically are presented to be a heart transplant patient. And then once they say no, then the LVAD is said yes to, and that's just the process. So this is, I want to say, about 40 days into this whole process, so a little over a month. Scheduled this next Wednesday to get an LVAD. It's the Thursday of the previous week. They have to go present to the board on Friday, and on Friday they have to present and say, you should get a heart transplant. They're going to say no, then you get the LVAD, so on and so forth. So Thursday afternoon, Dr. Brady comes in to my hospital room, and we're talking, like normal, and he says, hey, tomorrow we're presenting your case. We've already talked about it. He says, just so you know, I'm going to be pushing really hard for you to get a heart transplant. And I was a little taken aback. This is the first time that I had heard that. I had been told that this wasn't even a possibility. And this is what I've been praying for. This is what people around me have been praying for, including people from my church that had come in and done, prayer with me. And this was something that I honestly, although I prayed for, I didn't expect. So I knew that the LVAD was probably what was going to happen, but the fact that he told me that he was going to be pressing hard for a heart transplant, I was like, man, it made me tear up, man, that somebody would care that much. And then he said, just so you know what I mean, I've already made several calls. I've been doing this a long time, and I called in some favors. I'm going to push very hard. I'm like, wow, okay. So I immediately call my wife. I tell her this. She wasn't with me at the time. And like, okay, this is great. So, fast forward to the next day, Dr. Brady and Kelly, who Kelly is amazing. She's the one that basically kind of manages all the care and facilitates everything within the advanced heart failure team. I can't say enough about her. I mean, honestly, she was up at like 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning monitoring me from afar when she wasn't even at work. And she does that for everybody. Like, obviously, I'm not the only one, but she's a special human being, that one. Anyway, so they both come in and they tell me the news. And my wife's there, and they said, hey, you're going to get a heart transplant. And I was like, what? He says, yeah, we talked to everybody. And with the board, just so you understand, this is 50 people. There's 50 people in this room. Every single one of them have to agree to this. It's not, it's like a jury, right? It's, you can't have one person say no, otherwise it's a hung. No, everybody has to say yes to this. So they had convinced 50 people that I needed a heart transplant. 40 years old, in a family, they basically did everything they possibly could and pulled some strings. And I know that God had a hand in all this. Yeah, I know. So now I find out I'm getting a heart transplant. They say, yeah, we have to transfer you over to Banner University. Only Banner University and Mayo. They're the only two that do heart transplants. Now, they did a bunch of heart procedures at St. Joe's. So I'm like, okay, cool. This is amazing. And, there's two things when you go to heart transplant that have to really work out. Number one, the heart, it's got to be, so three things. Number one, the heart's got to be healthy, right? So the heart's got to be healthy, and it's got to be better than what you have. Otherwise, what are you doing? So one. Number two, it's got to match your blood type. Well, I'm O positive. Being O positive is somewhat rare. O negative is the rarest. So that was kind of going against me. And then size. The size of the heart's got to fit in your body. Well, I'm not an average size human being. I'm 6'4". I got a big frame, and they said that was going to be a problem. So there's two things they said were going against me as far as waiting for it. But, they said, we're going to get you a heart transplant, and, we just don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to send you over to Banner. They're going to care for you in the meantime and be in the process. So I said, okay. So this is a Friday. And on the weekends, nothing really happens in the hospitals like it normally does on the weekdays. The rounds that the doctors make are less. You see less people. There's just not as much going on. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to hear until Monday. I'm not going to be moved. There's no way. Well, Saturday morning, 3 a.m., my wife was sleeping on the couch right next to me in the room, and they say, hey, they're ready to ship you over to Banner. They're ready to send you over. They got a room for you. I'm like, wow, that was super fast. And I'm like, cool, this is great. It's 3 a.m. And they had sent over a team, so basically an ambulance team. The problem was my Impella, which I still had in me, that I needed to live because, I'll tell you a story in a second of what happens if that goes off. They were not trained on that. To go 2.5 miles, by the way. This is only 2.5 miles from St. Joe's to Banner University. So they said, oh, since we don't have anybody, we got to wait to move you. So wait for 3 hours. They finally come up with a solution that the air vac team is going to take me. So that's right. They're going to take me in a helicopter 2.5 miles because the air vac team is actually trained on this machine. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm going to get a helicopter ride. And that was quite the experience. There's some video that I took of that. If you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty funny. It's not the helicopter ride you think of when you're looking over the Grand Canyon. Basically, I'm in a gurney. I'm slid up. My feet are touching the front, what I call fishbowl, and I'm a big guy, so like I'm crammed in there. But it was a cool experience. I'd never been in a helicopter before. And we take off. They get me over to Banner. So now I'm at Banner, and at Banner, I'm being welcomed by this entire team of people. It was crazy. And then they say, oh, well, this Impella machine belongs to St. Joe's. We got to switch over to one that's here. I'm thinking, yeah, no big deal. So they get a machine from Banner. They go to switch me over. And mind you, to switch over, it's like turning one off, turning one on. Takes about 30 seconds. So I'm thinking, oh, it should be fine. During that 30 seconds, I passed out completely because my heart wasn't pumping anymore, right? There was no machine pumping the heart. So that's how important this machine was, that was on my heart, or in my heart, I should say. And I realized that, wow, I literally, this is my life support. If I don't have this, I'm gone until I get a transplant. So fast forward a couple days, and they're monitoring and giving me medications, basically just to kind of keep me in a certain place. They say, hey, we got to work with your insurance, make sure that everything is fully approved. And then we got to meet with the board again, and just make, number one, they got to say yes again, and then they've got to categorize you again, that 1 through 7. I'm like, okay, yeah, sounds good. So insurance, I was, I'd already been told that it was going to be good, but they hadn't agreed to anything yet. And then the second thing was getting the board to classify me. So I needed to be kind of high up on the list, just because I had this machine that was supporting me. Without it, I die. So I did come back into class 2. And what's really not neat about that, but what was good for me about that is it kind of moved me up higher on the list, because category one, somebody that comes into the hospital, they need an immediate transplant. So they're in critical condition, and if they don't get a transplant right away, they're going to die within a couple days. And unfortunately, for most of those cases, that is what happens, because hearts, certainly hearts. There's a lot of different transplants: kidneys, lungs, hearts, livers. But when it comes to hearts, they're very few and far between, and they're high in demand, just like all the other organs. But in that case, if you're a critical one, it normally is not a good outcome. Next, the next category 2 is somebody who needs it, who's on support for it, like I was, and that's what I thought I'd be classified as. And then it goes on down to people that are on that LVAD that I had mentioned, and they are going to live for a while on that machine, and they're okay, they're out and about doing their thing, and then they just kind of go lower on the list, and when a match comes about, they're called in, and they get the transplant. So they're going through this process, they're categorizing me, and they come back, and I find out that I am a category 2, which is fantastic. That's good news. They still can't give me a time frame. There's nothing they can really do to say, hey, it's going to be this long or this long. But I was told initially that, hey, it shouldn't be more than a couple of weeks based on your category. The one thing that is going to take a little bit longer that we have to anticipate is your size and being type O positive. So I'm like, all right, a couple weeks is what's in my mind at this point. Now, from not having a transplant to having one, I mean, that's a huge step in my mind. I was thinking I was going to be on this LVAD machine, which I described a little bit earlier, but again, this is a machine that I literally could not be off. I couldn't take off. I had to have battery packs. I had to have backups. I had to call my local fire department, so that they knew how to use the machine. Like if something happened, I would have to call SRP, which is our electric company, and they would put me at a higher status, like if power went down, because if I'm away from power too long, literally, that machine stops working. So, it was a pretty cumbersome type of deal. But anyway, to go into having a heart transplant. So now I find out that I'm having a heart transplant, and I'm a category 2, don't know the waiting period, and it's just now maintenance. It's just waiting every day in the hospital. I can't go home, and that began a pretty hard time, just because I knew what the resolution was, which was fantastic. It's exactly what I've been praying for. And I've been praying that this would happen quick, now that I was going to get a transplant. But each day, you kind of develop your routines just like you do in normal life. And my routine was pretty damn boring, just to be honest with you. I'd wake up in the morning at about 5:30. By the way, just a little caveat to the situation in the hospital, and all the caregivers were amazing, and this is just them doing their job, but sleeping in the hospital is not something that really happens well. I might have had maybe 2 stints of 5 hours in a clip my entire stay, and we're talking 66 days. That's how bad the sleep was, because they were constantly waking you up, getting blood work done, giving you medications at different times, checking your vitals, which is your blood pressure, your oxygen level. It was just nonstop. So anyway, that being said, because of that going on, and you're not sleeping well, you come up with these routines, and you're just constantly tired, and you try to take naps here and there. But I would wake up 5:30. Typically, I would take a walk, and with the Impella, I'd have to have that little machine by me. A nurse would walk with me, because not only do I have the Impella machine, but I'm hooked up to my inotrope, which is what I mentioned earlier, the IV, which is that keeps my heart pumping from another level, like an adrenaline. And I would walk around the floor. And the floor was about, I think it was 480 feet is what they said. And I would walk around, usually 3 or 4 times, which was, quite a bit for somebody in my condition, from what I was told. But I went from working out every single day to now just being able to walk around, a hall, which is very difficult for your brain to compute, or at least my brain to compute, because I lost 30 pounds of muscle. Basically, all my hard work that I put in for years had gone away. And I get it, least of my worries, but still something I'd worked for that had gone away, right? And, so take my walk, come back, breakfast would usually be there by the time I got back. And then once I'd eat breakfast, I would play a couple games of Sudoku, and I'd wait for The Price is Right. Yes, only sick people and old people watch The Price is Right. I watched it every day. Drew Carey's awesome, by the way. But so then after that, I would wait for lunch. So there's a 2 hour gap between that and lunch. So there would be things like medication I'd look forward to, which would come at 10:30. And then I'd have lunch at 12. And then after that, there was a big gap until dinner, but I'd have meds at 2. And it was just this cycle. And then, you get to the evening time, I would always walk around the floor. They had a really cool window that would outlook the city, and I would look forward to the sunset every day. It was one thing I looked forward to every day. And I'd take my laps, watch the sunset, come in, and then depending on the day, I'd watch some sort of TV. A lot of times a football game, different days of the week and whatnot. And then you try to go to sleep. You don't sleep. You watch the clock for about 8 hours on and off as you nod in and out of sleep. So this was the process that I was going through during the waiting period. And on day 3, so this is a Monday, my wife had just gotten there, and I was in what was called tachycardia. So my heart was beating super fast, and I couldn't really feel it because the machine, the Impella, was doing everything for me. Since I couldn't feel this, I didn't realize that my heart was beating as fast as it was, other than the monitors constantly beeping at me. That's another thing. There was not a 5-minute period of time in 2.5 months that I was in the hospital that I did not have beeping going on at some point. And sometimes it was just constant. But anyway, so I go into tachycardia. My pulse was at like 220 or something. Yeah, it was a little over 220. And the nurse that was in there at the time says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, no, I feel fine." I felt fine because the machine was pumping the blood for me. Was I fine? Absolutely not. So shortly after, they had come in and they said, "You need to lay down." Laid down. I went out, and they had to basically restart they did. They had to restart my heart. So I wake up about 30 minutes later after being put to sleep, having my heart restarted, and waking up not really knowing exactly what happened. So, they said that basically my heart was stopped for a certain period of time, and they got it back working, which is good. That scared me. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So I am really dependent on this machine, and I need to make sure that this tachycardia goes away. So they started adjusting my medications to, work in the tachycardia. And 4 days later, the same thing happened again. And this happened to me in the evening time, and it was something that I didn't see coming. Again, it was standing up, but this time I did start getting lightheaded. And unfortunately, somebody was in there after the machine started beeping super loud. They laid me back into the chair. Next thing you know, I'm out. Again, heart needed to be restarted. So this was the second time, and which obviously scared everybody that was in contact with me at the time, scared me, to a degree. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully they can get the medications right. So this is during the waiting time of me getting a heart. So I'm like, God, I just gotta get to the point where I get the heart that I'm waiting on. So they finally get the medications right there. So it did take the tack down, and which is great, and I didn't have that issue anymore. But about that next Monday is when I had rounds, which is when the doctors come in and the people that are part of the team come in, and they said, yeah, we're still waiting on insurance, and it could take up to a couple weeks for them to even respond. That's how long they have, which was very disheartening, because until that gets approved, I can't even officially get on the list for the heart. And I was like, wow, 2 weeks. But then again, my wife was there, and we said, hey, this is something we've been praying for. I don't accept that. I believe it's going to be sooner. We believed it was going to be sooner. We had hundreds of people praying for us, believing it was going to be sooner. And it wasn't 5 minutes after they walked out after the rounds, they came back in and said, hey, insurance just approved everything. That was step one. So then I get listed. So I get listed for the transplant on the list. And a couple of days go by. Again, it's just the same routine over and over. Doctors come in and say, hey, you look great. And again, I did. I felt pretty good because I had this machine doing all my heart work. But I was walking, around, with the machines. It's not like I could just get up and walk around without them. But, either way, I was stable. I could talk well. Didn't have the cough anymore. Thank God. That was just terrible. And I'm just in this waiting process. Well, one of the rounds, a few days later, one of the doctors, and I won't mention his name because I'm very fond of him now. But at the time, he came in and said, hey, just so you know, this could be 2 or 3 months before you actually get a heart, just based on, again, your blood type and your size. And so just don't have your hopes up too high. And when he said that, I lost my cool. I said, I don't want to hear that. I don't accept that. And I was not very nice at that point in time, because honestly, when you're going through something like this and you've been in a hospital, you go a little stir crazy. So I was not very nice at that point in time. And anyway, he left, and I had made a comment to the nurse about how pissed off I was about that specific comment. And again, he was being a realist. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but I did not accept that. And fortunately, he came in the next day. He had heard, what I had said to the nurse afterwards. He knew from being in the room with me after what he had said. And he did apologize. And he said, I really apologize. I was just trying to be very forthcoming with you. And I said, I understand that. But that is not what I've been believing for. It's not what I think is going to happen. So that's how I'm going to live. That's how I'm going to keep my mentality. So fast forward, and it's a Tuesday. And this is Tuesday, October 3rd now. So I'd been in the hospital from August 14th to October 3rd. And I get this call, and this call is from Melissa. Melissa's the coordinator, and she's, amazing, and she's helped, with a lot of different things in this process. But she gives me a call, and I pick up the phone. After initially the phone in my room rang, which is weird. It only rang twice, and the first time I never answered it. This time, answered it. This is maybe a week prior, but I answered the phone, and she says, "Hey, how would you like to get a new heart tomorrow?" And I almost started crying right then and there, because this is something that I had been praying for, believing in, seeing in my mind. And I said, yep, absolutely. Let's do it. So this is, again, the next day. And when it comes to heart transplants, one of the things with the heart, like, you've got to get in the body very quickly once it's actually taken out of the body that it's in. And it's usually within a 24-hour period max, but usually it's within about 6 hours. They like to have it done within 4 hours. So I didn't quite understand how they were going to get it done that quick, or why they were waiting until the next day, but it was on life support, and then that's how they were able to delay it and actually schedule it for me. And now, I first call is to my wife, and she didn't pick up. So I called a couple other people, my partner Eric, and a few other people, and I was ecstatic. I was like, wow, tomorrow, I'm going to get a new heart. And I knew it was about to happen. So before we go to the part that I get a new heart, what happens when you get a transplant is your life changes completely. Yes, you have a new heart, but your body does not understand that that is something that's helping you. It looks at it as a foreign object. So if you don't do some things like suppress your immune system, it'll try to kill it. Just like any virus that your body sees, anything that your body sees as a foreign object, it's going to try to kill it. Same thing with a heart, same thing with a liver, same thing, with any organ that you're putting in your body that's not yours, it sees as foreign. So they're like, you're going to be on immunosuppressants for the rest of your life. Now, the doses will taper down, but that just means that you're going to be a higher risk for cancer. You're going to have a higher risk for any sickness, because we have to suppress your immune system so your body doesn't, attack this heart and kill it, and then you go into rejection. So I've been told all this prior. But again, what are my options? Well, I already knew that my option could be the LVAD, which would eventually lead to the transplant anyway, or I can go home and die. So I obviously was very excited that the transplant was coming when I was told that it would not happen for me for a long period of time. Yet now it's going to happen, and it's going to happen really from August 14th to October 4th is a really short period of time from being checked into the hospital. But it happened about 12 days from the time I was actually on the list, which is huge. So now, knowing all this, my life's about to change. Everybody's excited. I'm getting this transplant, and I'm getting texts. I'm getting, people that were coming to visit, and I had so many great people that visited, which was just wonderful. Family members, friends, business, customers that are also friends that came and saw me and just, spent time with me. But everybody was wondering how I was feeling. Am I nervous? Well, since I had never been in any major surgery other than, the Impella, which technically is a major surgery, I didn't really know what to expect. But the reality was I wasn't nervous, as weird as that may sound. I knew that I was going to be knocked out, and when I woke up, I was going to have a new heart. I had, one of my friends, Dr. James, he's one of our neighbors. He was an anesthesiologist, and he had sent me this long message about, hey, when you wake up, you're going to have a breathing tube, and it's going to be super uncomfortable, and you need to just focus on your breathing because it's going to be something you don't expect. And he gave me this whole breakdown, and I'm thankful he did. So, I wasn't nervous. But the next morning, they start prepping me and, get ready, and they take me down to get the transplant. My wife was there, my aunt and uncle, and, several other people had stopped by, at different points apparently that were there. And I wake up, sure enough, I got a breathing tube. I am just like trying to figure out what's going on. I'd been on anesthesia. They said the heart transplant went really well. It went really fast. They didn't even have to do a transfusion of blood, which was pretty amazing. Typically, they have 4 quarts of blood that they have ready for you, but they didn't have to do any of that, which is fantastic. So shout out to Dr. Cologne that did the transplant, and Dr. Amabil, who would have done the transplant as well. They were 2 of the surgeons, but he did a fantastic job. And that breathing tube was in there, and one of the nurses, I remember, she was like, try to talk, and I'm trying to talk, and I had to cough. And when you have this breathing tube and you can't cough, you're trying to, and you can't breathe very well. So I'm trying to focus on my breathing, and they're telling me to do things that I can't do. So I'm kind of flailing my arms around, asking for a pen. And she thought I was trying to hit her. I'm asking for a pen so I could write down, and I did. She finally figured out I was asking for a pen. I wrote it down, and I'm like, I can't breathe. So they found out I was stabilized. It was good. They ended up taking the tube out, which was a very weird feeling. If you've ever, Hopefully you've never had it done, but it's a very, very weird feeling. You take it out, you cough, and then, you're back to normal breathing pretty quickly from there. So now I'm waking up, although the transplant was really quick. I had been out for, I think, 9 hours. This is maybe 2, 3 in the morning. And I'm taken back in the ICU, and I'm trying to just go to bed after this, which I'd already been asleep for a long time. And they wake me up the next morning, and they want to get me walking. Well, this walk was the hardest walk of my life. I literally didn't have any energy whatsoever. I got this new heart in me. I've still got, now at this point, I've got 2 machines that have all kinds of tubes just tied to me. I've got pictures, and I'll show you sometime, or maybe I'll put on the video. But it's ridiculous how much stuff that was, in my neck, in my veins, that were just keeping me, functional after this transplant. But I had to walk, and that was literally the hardest thing. I went from walking 4 laps easy the day before to getting this transplant and doing a half lap and feeling like I was going to die. And then they wanted me to do another one, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a strong guy, certainly strong-willed. And I was just like, wow, this is far more difficult than anything I've ever done physically. And that's when I'm like, okay, this is real. I got a new heart. Basically, I'm having to relearn things. I'm going to have to rebuild my body, my stamina, and all of this stuff. But hey, we're on the other side. We now are in that process where we get to learn how to live with this. And that was super cool. So from there, it was about 14 days before I was able to get out of the hospital. And during that time, my recovery went super well. They moved me up to what's called the step-down unit. The step-down unit just means that you're not in ICU and you don't have a nurse coming in every hour to check your blood pressure, giving you medications, just constantly in your room, which come to find out, when I was in the step-down unit, I was there, I think, for 10 days. That was very difficult. And I remember talking to my wife because, when you're in the ICU, you're seeing people pretty frequently. When you're in the step-down unit, you're upstairs, you don't see hardly anybody. You see that same nurse maybe twice in the day. And if you don't have visitors, it's literally just you sitting there trying to figure out what to do with your time. I could walk out and do walks and all that stuff, and I did. I got up to, I think I was doing like 30 laps a day. But, the pure silence and the solitude was pretty difficult. So they told me I was going to get out on a Wednesday. I believe this was at the end of September. This was... They told me I was going to get out sometime, I think the second week of October. And they delayed it because they had to do what's called a biopsy, and they wanted 2 biopsies. They already done one. All a biopsy is they go through your jugular, they stick a catheter down into your heart, and it's this little tiny pincher that pinches pieces of your heart, the new heart, and then they test it to make sure there's no rejection happening. So they had already done 1, no rejection, but they had to do 2, which they couldn't do another one for a week. Well, that means I had to stay in the hospital for another week, which is mentally very hard when you've already been there for, at this point, I had been there for 59 days, and I had to stay another 7 days, and, it was just very draining. So anyway, they do this. I get through the 7 days as best I can. Thank goodness for my wife, my partner Eric, and talking to me and just people coming. Nobody could see me at this point in time after the transplant, so it was just phone calls, or my wife, she could come see me, and which was great. She did every day. And so I made it through that 7 days, and it was kind of crazy. So but I made it, and then a week later I had to go back into the hospital because fluid started to develop around my heart a little bit more than they wanted to see, which can cause what's called tamponade. And what that is it can cause pressure on the heart, and you can just all of a sudden die. Fun fact about when you get a heart transplant, they actually cut the nerves that allow you to feel anything. So like if I were to have a heart attack, for example, or something were to happen, I'm not going to feel anything there because the nerves are cut. So with tamponade, if there's too much pressure on the heart and it stops, you just collapse and you're done. So they were very worried about that, although I did find out I was nowhere near like that death stage, but it's something they have to address. And what they do is they go in through your stomach and around your heart in a little sac, and they drain it all out. And then, I had to be in for 5 more days. So from being out for a week, going back in 5 days again, mentally, it was exhausting. And, I remember on the day, this happens to be Halloween, it was Dr. Amabil had come in. So he's one of the surgeons, and he and I had developed I think a pretty darn good relationship while he was in there. He told me stories about him becoming a surgeon, and I mean, the guy used to build pools, and he didn't even think about becoming a surgeon until he was 28 or 29 years old. He didn't even start going to school for it. He was a pool builder, and but fascinating story. An amazing surgeon, has done hundreds of surgeries. So somebody I trusted very much. But he came up to talk to me because we did have that rapport, and they thought I was going to go AMA, which is against medical advice, which is basically saying, hey, I need to get out of here, signing my life away after this procedure of them draining my heart. I said, I never said anything about that. I do want to get out of here. It is Halloween. I don't want to miss Halloween with my kids. I've got 3 kids, 13, 11, and 6, and these moments only go so long. Well, I had already hit all the thresholds and protocols that they told me I needed to hit to get out. So, he really, on my behalf, made some calls and says, what are you doing? Why is Norris still here? Let's get him out. He took the tubes out that were left in, got me all set, and I ended up getting out that day, October 31st. So it was a lot of fun. Got to, get out and be with my kids at Halloween. Stayed away from a lot of people. I did get to see a few neighbors, but one thing, because of the immunosuppressants, that I have to really be aware of, and I have to do, is I got to wear a K95 anytime I'm outdoors, or around a lot of people. But they are worried about getting colds and flus and sickness and that. So that's part of the reason on the people, but more so the environment, right? So here we have valley fever, and valley fever is something that is really can be deathly to people. I know people that have lost limbs, people have lost lives. I heard some horror stories after even hearing about valley fever. Once it was kind of in my mind, people were like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so that this happened to. But that's something from the dirt in Arizona that gets in your lungs, causes the virus, and it's not good. So, I have to wear that outside. And I mean, we're talking just outside, walking to my car, taking walks. Do I feel ridiculous? Absolutely. Will I follow their orders? Absolutely. Because you know what? They have my best interest. Like, they need to make sure that their heart patients survive because that's how they keep their program, and other people like me can be helped. So, that's kind of the story of how I got to the point after transplant. But with that, I got to say, I mean, I learned so much during that time. Some of the things I had to reflect on is, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? This is a new lease on life. Not that I wasn't intentional before, not that I didn't have goals and dreams and aspirations before, but this really kind of made me look internally and say, what's really important? Why do I want it? What do I want for my family? And I reevaluated everything. So I decided in there that I was going to go a completely different direction with my career. I didn't even know what yet. It was something that I felt even before that, it was probably time in the next couple of years to get out. But going through this, I realized that I want to help people in a much different way. I've been in the digital marketing world for a long time, and I'm really good at what I do, and I have been for a long time. But there's more to that. So, I decided I wanted to change careers. That was one thing. 2, I'm not going to miss the moments with my kids, even the ones that seemed mundane before, like taking them to practice, or being there for something, something that quite honestly they won't remember in 10 years. It doesn't matter. I get to remember that. Or planning trips, with them, even if they're short day trips and those types of things. I'm not going to neglect that stuff. I made a decision that I was going to be intentional with everybody in my life that's supposed to be there, and I was going to evaluate the people that don't need to be there in my life. And sometimes, that was hard for me before because, I do love people, but there's got to be some sort of value that somebody brings. And if they're constantly a negative, you got to make a change. So, there was that. But, through this whole process, one of the things is just still to this day and for the rest of my life, I'm going to be thankful for a lot of things. One, I have to say to the donor, the donor that I have their heart, and I can't tell you man or woman, age or anything like that because I don't know yet. I'll find out hopefully in a few months when I can write the family very anonymously, by the way. Then they can choose to respond, and if they respond, I can give them some more information, and maybe I can establish a relationship to find out more about the donor. But regardless of whether that happens or not, I'm indebted to that person, and I will make sure that I live a life that honors him or her, and I'm just extremely grateful for that. Number two, I am humbled by how many people reached out to me during this time and supported in whatever way. But I literally probably had over 1,000 people in some capacity reach out, whether it was text message, whether it was Facebook, whether it was a phone call, whether it was people coming to visit. I had like 30 different people or couples come to visit me, throughout my hospital stay, say hi, just spend time, to chat and to talk. And I was joking with my dad because my dad, he came and saw me obviously several times. And I said, I love it when people come see me. He said, but I said, one of the things that I find myself doing is comforting people when they walk in more than they're there to comfort me because, they see me and I'm hooked up to these machines and I look like I'm, about to die. And I have to kind of let them know, hey, things are going to be fine. It's all good. And then after that point, things get normal in every visit. I said, so, it is kind of funny to me that, I'm the one, calming people down, being in the situation. But, and incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for God and, for Jesus, keeping me on this earth. I know for a fact that I'm here for a reason. And whether it's just for my family or for who I'm going to help in my career or beyond that in an organization, we're going to start, the Heart of the Matter organization. I don't know, but I do know that my eyes are open. My vision is getting clearer and clearer of what's going forward. And I'm going to make sure that every day counts, right? So that's huge. And that's all, glory to God for being able to, be above ground and to be able to take action on a daily basis. So I'm grateful for all of those things. And I will say, I wouldn't wish this upon anybody. However, for me, going through it's been pretty amazing because I, number one, got to see humankind in a different way. And that's not just all the friends, the family, people that reached out, people I didn't even know, but also the caregivers, man. I'll tell you, the doctors, the nurses, the coordinators, all of them were amazing. And, they all were intentionally very caring at what they did. They wanted to do a great job. And watching that really, gives you some hope for the entire system of healthcare, or at least gave me hope on the system of healthcare and how people care about their jobs and what they do. And, there are a handful that stood out more than others. And I'm, extremely appreciative. And some of those are the nurses that would stay a little longer or chat and want to know my story a little more, or, would share laughs with, or the doctor that came in and would spend a little more time, talking with me. And it wasn't just kind of getting through the rounds, but just so many great people there. And, so, with all that, I'm very thankful. I do know that, big things are ahead. I did mention a career change. I'm in the finalizing of that. I have some pretty exciting announcements that will be coming up in here in a couple of weeks that I can help people with some things that I wish I would have had in place to the degree that I needed to have them in place when all this happened. And I will say that that will be my, going forward, it'll be something that I look forward to every day, is sharing something that's very personal to me that I know everybody needs, whether they think they do or not. So excited about that going forward. In 2024, I've got some amazing people in my life. It's been so much fun being out now for almost 2 months, hanging out with the family in every capacity you can imagine. Whether it's now we can't really go to restaurants. I got to stay away from big crowds and all that stuff. But going to football games with the kids, Pokemon hunting with my son Joshua, who's totally into it. Taking walks with my wife, every day, because that's all I could do up until a couple of days ago. And now I got cleared to go to the gym again. Thank goodness. So I'm going to be, getting back into the shape. Maybe not as big, muscular as I used to be. I don't really care about that, but something I can do every day, because that one thing that I can control every day, make sure that everything else goes right. And for me, that was taking care of my physical health. It's also been great. Like, as far as drinking, I mentioned that earlier on. I will probably never drink at any major capacity again, and I don't miss it. But the clarity is pretty damn amazing, I will say. It's pretty cool being clear on everything, and how much more you just get done and productive when you're just always completely focused, right? It's pretty cool. So, but with that, I wish you a blessed 2024. If there's anything I can do for you, or if you have any other questions, let me know. I made this, so hopefully you would understand the process that I went through. Thank you again to everybody who's reached out, for the people that gave financial support, the family, the friends, the neighbors that helped watch our kids, that brought food, that all of that, the people that would, call just to keep me company, that would come visit. I will never forget any of that. So I appreciate it. Love you all. And I will hopefully talk to you all soon.